On this episode of Drinks Around the Table, I sit down with author Josh Roberts. We talk about the winding road that led him to become a writer, from discovering comic books as a kid to TV and film in LA, and how, while he's beginning to embrace the horror genre, fantasy is where his heart lies. Hope you enjoy. This season's kickoff question is, what art form was your first love?
Oh, boy, it would have to be comic books, because I remember as a kid a couple of consistent things with me with comics. Like, my mom would go out with her friends, and she would jokingly say, if you don't tell anybody what we're doing, I'll bring you a comic book and Junior Mints. And so she would bring me a comic book and a little box of Junior Mints. And then my dad, I would go with him to, when he would fill up his truck with gas, and we'd go to this particular convenience store that was over near my house, and they always had Savage Sword of Conan magazine or Conan Saga and Heavy Metal. And so that's how I got into those as well, because he would let me buy one of those, because I'm like, Dad, this is like 4 comic books worth of material in one. And I remember, like, the first time that he flipped through a Heavy Metal, he kind of looks at me and he goes, "Don't show it to your mother." So that's the medium that, as far as art goes, that really got me into that. And then, I love movies, I love music, but yeah, comics were the first one for me.
So, was the attraction the espionage, like your mom's getting them and don't tell anybody, and your dad's like, don't tell your mom?
No, I don't. Well, it seems like that, doesn't it? But it really wasn't. It was more of just like I remember one of the first comics my mom brought me was the comic adaptation of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I had seen the movie, but I'm like, oh man, look at this. This is a comic book of it.
Wow.
And I liked The Incredible Hulk when I was a kid quite a bit. I know you're a big Hulk fan as well.
Yep.
But I remember getting a lot of Hulk comics when I was a kid. I never got very many Spider-Man. Batman was Batman back then. But what's funny is I remember I had the Spider-Man toy, and I think Mego made these, but they were the ones that had like a little rope that you could stretch from 2 different places, and it had like a little battery-controlled winch thing that would make them basically look like he was flying on a web.
Right.
I had the Spider-Man one of those, but even as a kid, I was like, it's Spider-Man, who cares? Why didn't they do one of the Hulk? That's what I remember thinking to myself. Why isn't there one of the Hulk?
Right.
And I'm like, as I got older, I'm like, why would they have done one of the Hulk?
Yeah, that wouldn't really track.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
And it's a good thing they didn't have those fists that they had in like the early aughts when I was a kid, because that would have been bad.
I would have been in a lot of trouble if I had had those things.
Exactly.
Because I remember getting in trouble with punching balloons. Remember those?
Oh, yeah. On the little,
Yeah, big old round balloon that was a lot thicker, and then it had a big rubber band on it that you held, and you just punch things
out
with it.
Yep.
Those got taken away from me constantly.
All that violence.
Yeah.
All right, so then what was the attraction? Was it the stories? Was it the art? Was it...
I would say initially it was the art, especially with like the Hulk comics and the true comic books. But then with it was that way with Savage Sword of Conan as well, because I as a kid I didn't think I would like black and white comics, but I loved Savage Sword of Conan.
Sure.
Because the art was amazing. You had all these amazing artists doing this work. And then I became a pretty avid reader at a fairly early age. And so I wanted content. And so those Savage Sword of Conans, like I said, they were the equivalent of like 4 comic books. And I would sit and read that thing over and over again. And it didn't even matter that I may have an issue that was in the middle of a storyline. I would just read it over and over. So I think it was more, I don't know. It's hard to say if it was art or story or both for me, because they all just kind of created that joy at the same time. And I think that's the beauty of comic books to this day.
Yeah.
Is you've got art and you've got story, and when you put them together, how can you not love that? I mean,
Right.
it's such an amazing medium.
Especially when they get that synergy of like both
Oh,
are
yeah.
pushing the narrative forward, and yeah.
Oh
well,
yeah,
and we so on Daniel's episode we talk he's big on like he has a nitpick with current comics that whole every comic should be is somebody's first comic, so you should write it that way. And he speaks to what you just talked about of like you used to, like back in the day, you jump in and you might be on part 3 of a 7-part story and you just
yeah,
caught up, you just figured it
Yep.
out. And so, which I get, like I agreed, and that's also how you learned, you know, particularly with editor notes of like what they're talking about happened in Amazing Spider-Man, blah blah
Right.
blah.
and also they were doing themselves a service by that, because if they were saying, you know, if you want to know how this came to be, go check out issue 67,
Right.
you know, and so then you would go seek it out.
Yeah.
And so that is lost in modern comics, because I agree with Daniel. You turn around, everything is a #1 issue. They do everything in mini series now. They don't do, it's hard to find a long running series,
Right.
and that's certainly diminishing by the day, because even the long running series that they have, they all end. They're
Yeah.
starting to end, or if they do end, they're not gonna start another, 500 issue anything. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, like legacy counting, and like where it's like you're trying to get the best of both worlds, where you get another new #1, but it's actually issue 676.
right.
It's,
And I've never been able to get a good idea from people how they like that or don't like that.
yeah.
Because most of the people that I know who are compulsive collectors, they're like, those numbers aren't accurate. So who cares if they put a legacy number on there? It's not right.
Right.
Like I remember when they started the legacy numbering, they put it Marvel. They put them in the back of the comic how they came to that number. And like for Spider-Man, they added the Ultimate Spider-Man issues in to get to the number they wanted for Amazing Spider-Man.
Really?
Those are different series.
Yeah.
They should not be combined.
Right.
And I think they did the same thing with Avengers. I think they put the Ultimates in as part of the Avengers. And Thor, they just made up. I think they included every issue of Journey into Mystery,
Right.
not just 83 on. They added
Sure.
the first 2 in there as well.
Wow. We're
Thor wasn't in
sounding.
that.
We're sounding very. Get off of my yard.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I did just turn 51 on Wednesday, so
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday.
thank you. I definitely feel 51 today.
All right. Well, then, so what else? You said you were just, gobbling up content. What else what'd you read outside of comics?
Oh,
Or I guess
It
who
was
did you read?
it was all fantasy for me. Obviously Tolkien. For some reason, I really hooked on to the Anne McCaffrey Dragon books when I was
Yeah.
younger. I really one of my favorite books when I was younger was also The Dark is Rising.
Oh, wow.
Which I-
Cooper.
Which I never realized as a kid was not the first book.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I argued with someone later on in my life. No, that's the first book.
It's like
And they're
book
like, "No,
3.
it's not." Yeah, right.
But
So it was-
a good book.
Yeah, and then I started reading science fiction like Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov, and Dune is still one of my favorite books of all time. Just because it is so masterfully done. And then, because I remember when I tried to read Dune Messiah, I absolutely hated it.
Yeah, I don't. What?
I only got like four chapters in, and I'm like, this can't be. This could not have been written by the same person.
Right.
You know.
It is definitely diminishing returns as the series goes for me. And then once
Yeah.
you get out of Frank's, like I'm out. I don't.
Yeah.
Even by the end of that first of his run, I basically just it's Dune. I'm good.
Right.
Because no, I agree. Dune is masterpiece, but
Yeah.
So what? All right. So for those at home that don't know who you are, what you do, you are author first, like
Sure.
as far as artistic endeavors.
We'll say I'm a writer.
You're published.
I am, yeah.
Even if you're not published, that's not what makes you a writer.
Oh, I know. Yes.
But, all right. Is that where you want to, like, do you have any interest in diverging into writing comics or writing shows or movies or
Well, yeah. I mean,
all the above?
I have stories that I think could be interpreted in any of those medium. I love the idea of writing comics. Well, my first published work is actually that comic adaptation of Feast of Crows, which is in Passage in Black, the graphic novel. And so that's a comic. I adapted the short story that Cullen Bunn had written into a comic script, and then we got an artist named David Moscati to do the art, and it's gorgeous. He's an amazing artist. And you don't see his work anywhere. I don't know what he's doing, but I would love to work with him again. So that was my first published work, and then I've got the short story and Swords in the Shadows. But yeah, I mean, I've written screenplays, or parts of screenplays. Cullen and I have pitched a TV show, a comedy TV show that's based in a comic book store. That's kind of loosely based on all the experiences that we've all had working in comic book stores. I mean, you and I have talked countless times about the crazy people that come through those stores, and I thought you could do a TV show that was similar to like Big Bang Theory and High Fidelity kind of mashed together. So Cullen and I wrote a pilot for that, and it's out. I sent it to a friend of mine in Hollywood, and he sent it with his buddy Heath that helps him, and nothing's come of it. But we were sending that out right before these strikes happened, so we'll see.
Right, yeah, that's kind of hit pause on everything.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, all right, so yeah, we can get into that a little bit too. We're like creatively, so you ended up in LA.
Yeah.
What's that story of how you ended up there and what you did?
So I was working retail here in Springfield, and I had a windfall of money because of my grandmother's estate. So I paid off all my debts, and I said, I'm moving to California. I had a cousin who had lived out there for a long time, and he said, you should come out here and do some writing with me. So I thought this is the best opportunity I'm ever going to have, because I was debt-free and had a big chunk of money. So I moved to LA and started doing some writing with him, and then I thought, you know what, I need to learn more about the film industry. So I started looking. I got this email that would show all the industry jobs on a daily basis. And I'll tell you, ironically, this is an aside, the whole time that I lived in California, Andy Dick was looking for a personal assistant. And I even asked the guys, because I got an internship with Lightstorm Entertainment, which was Jim Cameron's company. And the guys that were my bosses, I said, hey, should I apply for this job? They're like, no, do not. And I'm like, well, I mean, it'd probably be pretty high profile. They're like, no, trust us. We know people that know why he's looking for a personal assistant, because he was a mess at that time, apparently.
Yeah.
And he was like the stereotypical horrible Hollywood person, hiring and firing you the same day, throwing things at you, telling you to go get drugs for him, all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, I don't really want to put up with that. But I did 2 internships when I was in LA. I had an internship with this amazing woman named Lisa Fielding, who had worked in the industry for a long time, and then she had just decided to strike out on her own. And so I did a development internship with her, where I read scripts and did coverage. And she was working on tons of projects. I met some celebrities that were friends with hers, like Hank Azaria was in there one day. He was a really cool guy. And I missed meeting Brad Pitt by like 5 minutes because I left early one day and he came in to talk to another guy that was there in the offices. But through her, one day I was at the office with her, and she said, "Hey, Jim Cameron's company needs an intern. You should apply for that." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll do that." So I sent a really funny cover letter with my resume, because my resume had no Hollywood experience.
Sure.
I have a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry. And so in my cover letter, I basically said, why would a guy with a biology degree want to intern for you? And I was clever with it. I can't even remember. I wish I still had it, because it was probably the most clever thing I've ever written. But so they called me in for an interview, and the first thing they said was, the reason you got the interview was because of your cover letter. And I said, wow, that's great. So it did what it was supposed to do. Right. And then they said, we will give you an internship on the spot if you can tell us who the captain of the Orca is. And my mind went blank.
No.
And I said, I know it's Jaws. I know it's Robert Shaw. I cannot remember his character's name.
Oh.
And they said, you're the first person that's ever even known what we were talking about. And I said, wait a minute. You've got UCLA and USC film school students coming to you for an internship, and they don't know what Jaws is. And they're like, oh yeah, you'd be surprised. These guys come in and they say, I want you to know that I don't file and I don't type and I don't do things like that because I'm getting a film degree from USC. And they're like, you understand what an internship is, right? Yeah. But for me, in my cover letter, I said, I'll wash Jim Cameron's car. I'll go pick up his dry cleaning. I'll do whatever you tell me to do within reason, because you're going to teach me what you want me to know about film.
Right.
And so it was a great internship. Those guys were great. I learned the production side of film from them. So editing and just basic editing on the Avid system and how to load a camera. And I cleaned the prop room. I got to try on all the Terminator 2 prosthetics, one day when I was in the prop room. And they had me shredding documents, which was fun, because every once in a while they said, what we want you to do is, if there's an original storyboard in there or pictures or things that are original, pull those out, but then all the copies and everything, just shred all that paper. And so I found this screenshot of the Terminator that said a special thank you to Harlan Ellison. Well, anybody who knows who Harlan Ellison was, he was pretty cantankerous. So I said, what is this? Yeah. And so I said, what is this? And they said, well, about a month before Terminator was supposed to come out in theaters, Harlan Ellison called Jim Cameron and said, I'm going to sue you. And Cameron's like, why? He said, because you stole my idea. And he's like, your idea of robots from the future coming to the past to kill the future? And he's like, yep, that's my idea. I came up with it first, and I'm going to sue you. And Cameron pauses for a second and goes, I'm not going to give you any money, Harlan, but I'll give you a special thanks in the credits. And Harlan Ellison goes, okay, and hung up the phone. And so he did. He put it in the closing credits.
Right.
Yeah.
That's wild. What year is this? Like, what time frame is this, by the way, when you're out
I
there?
was out there in 1999 into 2000.
Okay.
And Jim Cameron was terrified that the world was going to end with Y2K, so he was stockpiling things at his ranch in Malibu, and he had a big New Year's Eve party just in case,
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was a kooky guy. He drove two different Humvees, a white one and a black one.
Any particular reason?
He wanted two different Humvees, I guess. I don't know.
Couldn't land on the color.
Couldn't decide on a color, so he picked black and white.
Right. Wow. All right. So, I mean, creatively, you got to do some cool stuff, or at least learn the basics. So when do you part ways there?
Well, once my internship was over, they said if Jim was working on a project, we would hire you, but we don't know when he's ever going to do another movie. And think about it, he didn't do another movie. He did Titanic in 96 or 97.
Yeah, it came out in 98, so yeah, like 96-ish.
Yeah. And the next movie he did was Avatar.
In 2009 is when it dropped, so he probably started filming that in mid-aughts. Yeah. Wow, yeah, that'd have been a while to live in LA.
Yeah, and in between there, he did a documentary about the Bismarck. He did a documentary about the Tomb of Jesus. He did some weird stuff like that, but he wasn't doing anything where they could have hired me. So
Right.
I was still interning for Lisa Fielding as well. And I was trying to get a job, and I got this great interview with a company that at the time was bringing foreign comic book properties over to the U.S. to adapt into movies. I had an amazing interview with them. They said, "Man, we love you. We love your comic book knowledge. You're the first person we've interviewed, but, here in the next week, we're going to get back to everybody." And then I never heard from them. And so when I got in contact with them, they said, "Oh, yeah, the owner's brother needed a job, so we had to hire him instead of you."
Nepotism won out.
Yep. And so that's when I realized, all right, I've spent all my money and I'm not making any money. So I moved back after that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're worked comic stores, like you're still around comics.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, encyclopedic knowledge about comics.
Used to.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know.
You still hold your own.
I can hold my own. That's for sure. Yeah.
So is it the project with Cullen is that where you first get looped back into the creative side of it instead of the consumption side?
Yes. Yeah. Working with Cullen, getting to know Cullen, and then, him offering to let me adapt one of those stories got me back into the creative side of it. Because I wrote some things when I was in LA, but man, what you learn in California in the entertainment industry is it truly is not how talented you are. It is the connections that you have.
Sure.
And that's why, when people say, "How did this movie get made?" It's so horrible because somebody knew somebody. That's how it got made.
Right.
And it gets frustrating because I was not a great writer back then, but I was getting better as I wrote. And I read some amazing scripts when I worked for Lisa Fielding that never got made into movies. And I read some really bad ones that were going to get greenlit because it was, if we make this movie for this guy's cousin, then this guy is going to make sure that we get funding for this movie that we want to do later.
Right.
And so that was frustrating to me because I've always, I was raised to stand on your own merit, and that was the value system that I've had since my childhood. And it's tough when you're faced with an industry that doesn't really care about merit.
Right.
They just want quid pro quo.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, and I mean, it's not just LA either. It's everywhere. But
yeah.
All right. So then, is that why you're kind of sticking? Not that there's a tier or a hierarchy here, because creative is creative, but is that why you moved more prose comic side, or is that just that's where the opportunity was?
I think it's just because that's where the opportunity is. Like I said, I've got lists of story ideas, and some of them are screenplays, some of them are full-length novels, some of them are short stories, some of them would be better as comic books. And so when those ideas hit me, I try to write down the basics of that idea and then try to come back to it later. My biggest problem, like everybody's biggest problem, is time.
Yeah.
I don't devote enough time to writing, and I don't have enough time to just be a writer,
Right. No, I definitely get that. I mean, I'm gonna have to be 120 to get all of the projects I've got currently in various stages of development. So yeah, some's gonna get left behind, but I'm in a mental place now where I'm putting out what I can put out, and fate will play out the way it does.
And I applaud you because you are putting stuff out. I mean, you have how many books published now?
I've published. God, how many have I published now? 2, 4, 6. Published 6. I've been published, but between published and been published, I've been in 9.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, no,
and you're still working on your comic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and a comic on top of that.
Yeah, so I applaud you because you do a great job of carving out time for writing, which is, what everybody says is the most important thing. If you want to be a writer, you have to write. Right. You have to write. You have to write. And so
It's a
you have-
hard-earned lesson. I mean, it took me this long.
Yeah, well, and I'm still learning that lesson because I'll get home in the evening and sit down after I eat dinner and I'm like, what am I going to do tonight? And I've got time to write,
Right.
you know, but half the time I fall asleep on the couch. So, you know.
I mean, that's how it goes sometimes. That's part of the reason I do this show, though, is I will be stimulated after this conversations where it's like, okay, now it's Friday night. I'll do whatever. I'll go draw a page or I'll go write, shoot for 1,000 words or whatever. And that's why I still carve out time for this show is even talking to people that aren't writers, I'll still get jazzed and be like, okay, let's go.
Well, let me ask you this then. Like, do you set goals for yourself like that? Like when you sit down to write, is it a time or is it a bulk or is it an amount of work? Like, do you say I'm going to write 1,000 words or do you say I'm going to write for an hour and a half?
I tried to be like 1,000 words because as everyone knows, Stephen King is one of my big influences. And I know he does 2,000 words a day, which I was like, I'm going to do 1,000. But part of that pressure was it locked me up. Like it would get, so now I know I'm going to come home from the day job and my wife shares the bizarre scheduling. So like we'll try to get time together if we're both home at the same time then. But for the most part, I shoot for, my schedule is Monday through Thursday, usually 5 to about 8, 9 if I'm in the zone, but usually 3 hours a night. And then Friday night, I will draw on the comic, and then Saturday I'll draw on the comic, and then Sunday I try to clean up everything I did Friday and Saturday as far as inking or lettering or whatever. Because I try to shoot for a page a weekend on the comic. So yeah, I 7 days a week, I've got allotted time.
Yeah.
But that's why, like, it gets to be where you have these ideas that, like, the ideas you're talking about will get to be where it's like, this isn't going to happen if I don't make it happen. Like, there's nobody else that can come do this for me. And so that's what got me here. Plus, I have an understanding wife who gets it. Like, she's in her own, we're very happy, not happy, that's not the word I'm looking for, but we're very lucky to be with a significant other who gets it and doesn't make us feel guilty, and we don't make her feel like the trade-off is, we don't have time. That time we could have for each other is getting used up, but we both have ambitions, so that's where we are. Okay, so you've got all these stories. What would you say what artists, speaking of my influences, what are your influences as far as how you write, or if not how you write, maybe the stories that you want to tell? Like, what are those influences? Just basically everybody you just named, or is there specific influence?
Well, all of those people that I've named, I'm not as well read as I like to think I am. I love Edgar Allan Poe. I love the style of Edgar Allan Poe, but I can't write like him.
Nobody can.
No, you did all right.
No.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, but no.
I don't know. I look at, to me, it's more just about the story that comes to me, the story that pops in my head. Like, I will wake up in the middle of the night from a dream and be like, man, that'd make a good movie. And so I've got my phone by my bed and I've got this notepad app on my phone. And so I'll just type in the most basic, ideas from that dream and then come back to it later. And I'm like, what the hell? But then I'm like, okay, I see. Okay, this could be a pretty good story. But so I don't know. I am influenced by all the media that I've seen. I love Wes Anderson movies. I love Tolkien. I love Bernie Wrightson was one of the greatest comic book artists ever. I love his style of art. So all of that kind of mashed together in my brain and my crazy brain starts taking pieces from all of those things and spitting out something new that I'm like, oh, okay, I can see that being a fun story.
Right.
So I like the horror genre, but I've been trying to work on a fantasy novel as well that's kind of loosely based on all the D&D stuff that my friends and I used to do when we were kids. It's set in that type of a fantasy realm. And I want to make it like a series of short novellas, so you can pick it up, read it in an evening, and then pick up the next one and read it in an evening. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place right now, honestly.
I gotcha. Well, that was going to be my next question. Two of my next questions you've kind of already touched on. Then is what genre is pulling at you the most? So it's fantasy.
Yeah.
And then what? Because I know there's at least one thing that you have coming out that I don't know how much you can talk about yet. But of the projects you can talk about, what is at the forefront? Like, what is it? That D&D novellas?
Well, yeah, I mean, I try to work on that every week, and then I was looking at some market listings for short stories, and there was one that I missed the deadline on, but I thought, man, that's a cool idea. They called it what was the term they used? Oh, it'll come to me. But anyway, they wanted horror stories that were set on the coast or in some giant dilapidated palatial mansion, something like that. So I had this idea forever about, because I was in a fraternity in college, and anybody who's been in a fraternity knows that your ritual for your initiation has some ridiculous stuff in it, as far as like what would happen to you if you broke the rules, or what would happen to you if you betrayed the trust of your fraternity. And so I've always had this idea in my mind about, some kind of horror story related to that. And so when I read this thing about this coastal horror short story submission, I'm like, I know what I'll do with that. And so I started writing this story about this fraternity that invites back all their expelled brothers every year to this retreat. It's like a let's reacquaint ourselves retreat, but they're actually sacrificing them to summon some elder god, and so that's the premise. And so I've been working on that a little bit. I've got it all outlined. I just need to start putting the meat on the bones. But
right.
So that one kind of, that wasn't a dream or anything I had. I had already, like I said, I already thought about doing this with the whole idea of the fraternity thing, but it kind of came together pretty well, the two of them together. So, because it's got a cool visual aspect, it's on this, churning waves on the coast of wherever, and in some giant old Lovecraftian type mansion, So, yeah. And I did this story prompt 1,000-word short story that Cullen gave me about it's a science fiction story. Did I ever let you read that? It's called Bounty.
Yes.
So I want to expand that.
Right.
Because I want to make that a bigger science fiction story.
Because
I really like the tone of that, because the main character he breaks the fourth wall, and he's really snarky, and so I like the idea of that. Yeah. He's a bounty hunter in a world. Well, it's in our solar system, but all the planets are populated by different races now, and so I'm going to explain how that happens and all that stuff. So just expand that universe.
Right. No, that's cool. So has Cullen led you down horror? Like you talk horror more than you used to. It's not like you never did, but you definitely talk about creating in that sandbox more than you used to.
Definitely. I mean, he has definitely influenced that for me. And then, with the guys that we hang out with are all huge horror nuts.
Yeah.
And so I like them. I like hanging out with them. So I thought, well, I need to start watching more horror movies if I'm going to be able to talk with these guys.
Yeah, keep up with them.
They're always on about some new thing, a new horror movie. So I got them the other day, though, because This movie came out on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called El Conde.
Mm-mm.
It's about a 250-year-old vampire that decides he wants to die. And it's a Spanish film. So my best description of it is if Wes Anderson made a vampire movie, this is what it would be. It's awesome.
Wow.
It has the tone of a Wes Anderson movie. It has the quirkiness of a Wes Anderson movie, but it is a foreign vampire film. And it's crazy because there's a narrator that's all the narration is in English, but then all of the action with the characters is subtitled in Spanish.
Huh.
You gotta watch it. It's on
El
Netflix.
Conde. All right.
El
I'll check it
Conde,
out.
which means the Count, because that's what he calls himself, is the Count.
Nice.
But it was so good, and the whole time I'm like, was Wes Anderson involved in this? Because I'm like, this is the perfect, the perfect mimicry of Wes Anderson's style. So,
all right, I'll definitely check it out. Well, we're running out of time. We're a little over,
Okay.
Not too bad. I don't want to keep you too long. Where can everybody find you?
I don't know. Facebook is really about the only thing I have at this point. I am terrible with social media.
I got you.
But I'm just Josh Roberts on Facebook, so come and see me.
Well, I don't know if you want everybody knowing your private or your personal Facebook, but
It doesn't matter.
I can put it down below if you like.
I can edit out the ones that I need to. So
There you go.
But yeah, I'm terrible. I don't have Twitter. I don't have any social media. So I'm hard to find. But I'll try to do better. You can find me through Aaron Conaway.
Great.
Director.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks for having a drink with me.
Thank you for having me on.
Definitely. Till next time.